This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. Well, my guest today, literary agent Dr. Uwe Stender, is a full member of the Association of Authors Representatives. Uwe's tastes are eclectic, and he's interested in all kinds of nonfiction and fiction. In nonfiction, he's completely open to any project from memoir, pop culture, and health to how-to, gardening, history, and everything in between, including nonfiction for children. In children's fiction, he's looking for young adult and middle grade, also known as YA and MG. In adult fiction, his tastes tend toward women's fiction, psychological suspense, and mysteries. As an immigrant to the United States, he is always eager to bring projects from underrepresented voices into the world. In short, he likes it when authors surprise him, so maybe he'll surprise us today. I'm truly delighted to welcome my first literary agent to StoryBeat, Dr. Uwe Stender. Uwe, I'm so glad you've decided to join me today in the studio.
Well, thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background. What was it that led you to pursue the life of being a literary agent in the first place?
It's kind of a long story.
Tell it.
I had a different career before, and one day I just realized that there was no way I'm going to be able to survive another 30, 35 years in that job.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I hated the job per se, but I just couldn't visualize being, doing this.
It wasn't in your heart.
No, exactly. It wasn't in my heart. And so I've always been interested in literature. I have a PhD in German literature.
Right.
And so I helped a friend out with a project one day, trying to sell his project that he had written for a middle school thing. And I really enjoyed it so much that I was like, I think I could be an agent. However, I realized I would normally have to live in New York City. And it happens that one of the parents on my soccer team I coached was working at Simon & Schuster.
Right.
And I happened to mention to him, I wish I could be in publishing, but I have to move to New York City. And he said, yes, that is the case.
Usually is.
Yeah. And so I kind of gave up on that. But then about 2 years later, the kid had long graduated and I have not talked to the father. He called me one day and said, if you still want to be a literary agent, you don't have to move to New York City anymore. and he said, I can help you and maybe introduce you to some people if you're really serious.
It's in part because of the internet that you're able to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. Email was the key point.
In the old days, forget about it. You had to be there where the actual paper was coming in the door.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So quickly explain to us, clearly you're not from Pittsburgh.
Yins.
There you go. Where do you come from? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Germany.
In Germany.
Yeah, near Hanover.
Got it. So what brought you to Pittsburgh in the first place?
Well, that's an interesting story too. I was studying English at the time, and in order to get your degree in Germany, you have to live in the country of the language that you're studying. I lived in England before for a while, and so I didn't want to go back to England, and so it was Australia, New Zealand, Canada, or the United States.
Wow.
And so I did apply to the United States, to a couple universities, Pitt. What else? Let me think. University of Hawaii, because I used to love Thomas Magnum, and Yale. And I actually got offers from all three, but the University of Hawaii and Yale wanted to have me there for 2 years. And I didn't want to go for 2 years. I just wanted to go for one and go back to Germany. Pitt wanted me for only 1 year. and 30 some years later,
You're still in Pittsburgh.
I'm still in Pittsburgh.
And clearly it's been very good for you to be here.
Yes.
So, all right, what were your earliest inspirations and influences aside from Thomas Magnum?
What do you mean, like
In terms of literary stuff?
Literary stuff.
What influence? When you started off, you studied it.
Yes.
Now you represent it.
Yes.
So where were your influences from? Where did this inspiration to do this come from? What did you look at in books and so on as a young person that you went, this is great?
Yeah. I mean, in Germany, you can read a lot of books from other cultures and countries.
Mm-hmm.
So in our book charts, we have books from Germany and England and France and Spain and Africa and Japan and wherever. And so you kind of learn to travel through the world via reading. And I used to read a lot as a kid, and I just kind of escaped, from my daily life into books. And so I just always loved that. And then later, I always enjoyed kind of like discovering something was cool. So even if I like the record, I would always kind of predict which song should be a hit and which song shouldn't be. And so I kind of felt like loving to kind of find talent. And so when I went into publishing, the most exciting thing to me is to just find something that's not out there yet, find some talent that could tell great stories, that would like help people or have people see themselves in it or just escape their world, their real day-to-day life. And that's really kind of what I was into.
So you like escapist fare?
Yeah, I mean, like it's just like I didn't like my job anymore. And escape to being a literary agent. I just like, and helping people too. So like self-help books, for instance. But just like, you can get away from your life. You read a memoir about a star or somebody you like, or some kind of like true crime book, or a memoir of an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of live your fantasy through it a little bit.
And as you were growing up, who were your favorite authors? Who did you, always go to?
Well, I used to love Patricia Highsmith, and Agatha Christie, and
Mysteries.
Raymond Chandler, kind of adult mystery. And I read those when I was like 11, 12.
Oh, so that you were reading quite mature stuff for an 11-year-old.
Yes, I just loved reading. I loved Enid Blyton's books, the Five Friends series, or whatever they were called, and I just enjoyed reading fiction from other cultures and countries, and also German authors. That mostly wrote stories about, either fantasy worlds or even about like other things not specifically related to Germany.
But you also represent and are open to clearly nonfiction and more realistic things.
Yes, I mean
now
now
fantasies.
Yeah, no. Now as as an agent, I do anything in nonfiction, whatever, and I do primarily YA middle grade and. All genres there within that in that setup, contemporary, fantasy, everything.
So when you first got into representing folks, did you have a particular agent that you admired or looked up to as someone that was an inspiration for you in that world?
No,
so,
not really.
So you're self-taught then?
Pretty much, yes.
And
well, I mean, I got the help, and there was an agent when I first started out. People were kind of like, "Who is this guy? Where does he come from?" And there was an agent from another agency. Her name is Gina Panettiere. And I think she felt bad for me that I was got ripped online. And she could tell that I was genuine and sincere and hardworking and wanted to build something. And so she kind of took me under her wings, met me for my first book expo. She helped me with my first contract that I got. So she was very supportive, especially when it was rough at the beginning. And I kind of felt like, ugh, I don't know if this is going to work out. And then she helped me.
She helped to mentor you a little bit.
Yeah, a lot, actually.
A lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always helpful to have a mentor when you don't know what you're doing, I think.
Yes.
But frequently some of the greatest things in the world, greatest inventions and art and so on come from people that don't know what they're doing and are just fumphering around trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I figured I knew books and I knew, good writing.
But that's different from selling it.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, selling it's a whole separate art form.
Correct. But you got to be kind of, I mean, I've always been competitive. So for me, it was always an issue of like, can I make this work and how? And I wouldn't give up even if I get, rejections.
You turned agenting into athletics.
Yeah, essentially.
It's like playing soccer. You're going to kick the ball back and forth until someone gets a score across that net, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so describe for the listeners what a literary agent does. What do you do?
Oh my gosh, so much. So I mean, obviously you are getting queries and trying to find projects that you love, and then you make an offer, seeing if you can get them. But then,
where do you look?
Oh, they come to me.
They come to you.
They come to me. Yes.
At this point, you have no trouble finding material because it's coming in the door.
Yes. No. It all comes to me. I mean, even when I started out, it came to me. Once people knew I was an agent. At the time, I guess a lot of things fell through to me that other people didn't want, and I was kind of like, maybe, I don't know, maybe I was like the last hope for some people. But now, as the agency then grew and became really successful, now we get like the top of the top, and I love the manuscripts. I represented from the beginning. I loved them. They were strong projects. Otherwise, I would have not taken them on.
You clearly don't represent every book that comes in the door.
Oh my God, no.
You take the cream of what you think works.
Yes, I mean, I get about 50 queries a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Holy moly!
So you figure this out, and then you offer on, I don't know, a couple handfuls of projects, maybe. And then, some you don't get. There are other agents that want it, and sometimes you lose, and sometimes you win in that competition.
You do a lot of reading, obviously.
Yes.
That's what you do all day long, more or less, I would assume.
Well, actually, not as much as you would think, because you have other things to do, like negotiating contracts, working with my other agents. We talk to each other a lot about things. Mm-hmm. Royalty statements, paying, phone calls, traveling to New York and L.A., and so the reading actually almost is something that you have to push onto the weekend or at night.
So it sounds like you're getting about 15,000 books a year, somewhere in that ballpark. How many of those do you actually read, do you think? Do you think you read 1,000 of those?
No, not that many.
Not that many, because that's a lot of reading.
Yeah, no, I kind of, at the query stage, I kind of, turn most of it down.
Right.
But I probably read, I don't know, about like 10 a month. Or sometimes more, but not all the way.
That's a lot of reading.
Sometimes I might read like 25, but then I don't read them all the way through because I can tell, this is not going to work for me. But yeah, so I guess if you include partials, I might read like 300 or 400 books a year.
Do you find that there are some authors that keep pushing on you for a specific book, or once it's done, it's done? Once you reject it, it's rejected? Or do you have people come back to you?
No, because when I say, I usually respond by saying it's not quite right for me. And so that means that now, if sometimes I read a book and I enjoy it, but it's not like totally for me,
mm-hmm.
then I offer a rewrite and resubmit in some cases for that book.
Got it.
Or I tell the author, I really loved your writing. The book isn't quite right for me, but if you don't find representation for this book and you write another book, I'd love to see that other book.
And so explain why writers even need an agent.
Well, there's many reasons, really. One of the primary reasons is to find a publisher, because a publisher will not accept usually unsolicited queries. They only take queries from agents. And so there's no way for them in to the business other than they get them kind of like pre-weeded, so to speak, by an agent. The next thing is, of course, contract negotiations. Contracts are very difficult and complex, and the publishers, and I don't blame them, try to get the best deal for them.
Of course.
And so I, as an agent, step in to try to get the best deal for the client, obviously. And so then you have these negotiations. And as you accumulate experience, you know how to do these contract negotiations. And a regular person wouldn't know this. And frankly, even a writer who's done, 5, 6 deals with an agent and then feels like, oh, I can get rid of the agent. I don't think they can really handle it because it updates all the time. There's always new clauses being entered in by publishers. Every publisher is different. So you need that then for foreign rights sales. You need an agent to do that. You can't do that yourself.
So a U.S. publisher will not necessarily publish into foreign markets?
Well, that's part of the contract negotiation. I mean, sometimes they acquire world rights, which means they can do whatever they want with it.
Right.
But we usually try to fight to keep those foreign rights for the writer because it's more financially beneficial to the writer. And so, but again, we keep those rights and we work hard on selling them. So a writer could never do this. And then plus for film rights, they again need an agent because there's no way a writer is going to find their way into Hollywood, for instance, without support. And so we as agents, we do this.
Unless they're super famous, like the top of the top writers, the Stephen Kings and that kind of world, they can probably name shots as they wish. They can probably name what they want to do.
Yeah, but they still probably should have an agent.
I would think they do because they don't want to waste their time. They would rather waste their time, not waste their time, but they'd rather use their time, utilize it writing rather than worrying about the business end of it.
Yeah, famous people need agents. Oftentimes, of course, they're like, if they're musicians or whatever, they're represented by talent agencies, and you can't get them, although there are some exceptions.
All right, so this is probably a difficult question for you to answer because you have so many different styles and genres that you are interested in, but what attracts you to a story? What can a writer do that when you read it, you're going to hopefully be hooked?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's, I can't specifically say, I think it's usually the voice that engages me.
Explain what that is. I mean, I know what it is, but I want to hear your perspective on it. What do you mean by the voice?
The voice. Well, it's what drags you kind of into a book. It's the way the narration is done, the way the main character thinks and is, like in their world, in their life. For me, a really viable writing voice, you can hear that the writer thinking in a sense that you can hear their voice. Well, yeah, I think in specifically like in memoir, yes, but I think in fiction, not even. The character, you can hear the character. The writer is actually able to transfer like a voice onto the main character and the other character, so they become like real people that kind of literally appear in front of you. And so that's one thing I'm drawn to. But another thing I'm drawn to is basically it's like instinctive again. If I read a project and it sounds interesting for whatever reason, it attracts me, I start reading it, then if I cannot put it down, if I just want to like
keep going,
skip meals, or if I have to go out to a dinner or something, I don't want to go, I'm going to call and say, hey, I can't come tonight because I have a headache. I really want to.
You have a book ache. That's what you have.
Exactly. And so then I know. But if I get a project that I like, the writing is great, even the plot is great, the story is great, the pace is good. But I find myself putting it down and being able to live without it. And if I find myself putting it down more than once or twice, then I know that book isn't for me. It might be a great book for other people, but just it won't work for me. I literally need to feel that fire. I want to like burn. When I see this, I want to just like not think of anything else. And then once I get through that book and I feel that excited and like exhilarated and almost like cleansed, then I'm going to make the call to the author and like do everything I can to get the project.
So you just used the magic word for me, the word cleansed. What you're really talking about, I think, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that that those stories have some form of catharsis so that when you get done, you feel that emotional release.
Absolutely.
And in my opinion, this is something that I've been talking about for a number of years now. The reason why we go and watch movies multiple times or watch TV shows multiple times or read books over and over again is because we want what I call the storytelling drug, which is catharsis.
Yes.
And that's what brings us back over and over again.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's like a drug. I mean, that's actually a very good analogy.
Thank you.
I
get lucky every once in a while.
Well, even like in movies. I mean, my favorite movie is probably Cinema Paradiso.
Yes,
and
beautiful.
I remember seeing that for the first time in the movie theater. And at the time, my girlfriend and I were there, and I started sobbing uncontrollably.
Really?
And she was like, and I cried so loud, people thought like somebody had died, and I couldn't stop crying for like 20 minutes because it reminded me of like immigration. Leaving your family, your parents, your culture, everything behind. And the way it was told, it was so touching. And that's kind of what I want to get out of books. I want books that make me cry and laugh, or books that keep me at the edge of my seat because I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen next?
So I would imagine that the stories that you tend to be turned off by, they're just not speaking to you in some way. The voice is not turning you on. You're not getting excited at all.
Correct.
And so, that's a little easy for us to say and a lot harder for a writer to figure out as to what would excite Uwe, and you can't really write a book, I don't think, purposefully to attract an agent. You're trying to write a book that you like first and that others might like.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, since I don't even know what I want, they can't write for my taste.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. You don't know what you want.
Right.
It's like that old definition of pornography. You know it when you see it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think it's also like music, and it's personal. It's subjective taste. So what I might love, somebody else might hate, and vice versa. And like if I hear a song for the first time, I might be like, ugh, I don't like this. No reason. Everybody else likes it, whatever. But then I hear another song, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to hear this over and over and over. And I get that same, I need to hunt it down. I take Shazam and find out what this song is, and then I'm getting it,
Part of what you do then is you apply your tastes to what you accept, and that is what you then sell, is your taste. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's what
so the publishing
speaks to me.
houses trust your taste in a sense.
Yeah, I hope so.
Of course, they're going to read the book. They're not just going to take the book and
Right.
publish it because you say so. But nevertheless, they're trusting when you come to them with something, you've vetted it in some way where you believe in it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, the publishers, when I query them, they know it's a good project. Now, it might not be for them, and they might not request it, or most of the time they do request it, and then they still may not buy it. But at least they know that this is a good book. It's well edited. It's well written. And then, so I think they're pretty excited when they get projects from this agency. And it's not just me, but the entire agency.
Sure. Obviously a publishing house has to get fully behind something in order to sell it.
Yes.
To sell it to the public, because you're not going to sell it to the public. You might help a little, but that's not your job. Your job is to sell the book to a publisher.
Correct.
And so you really only are looking for one person to sell it to, essentially.
Yeah, essentially, yes. I mean, I query a bunch of people at different houses, but yes, and the same goes for film rights. It just takes
You're
one
just looking
person.
for one champion. Right? I mean, you're the first champion for the writer. Then you're looking for one more champion. And then they're looking to sell it to lots and lots of people.
Yeah, or again, I do it, or my Brent Taylor, who does our foreign rights, he does it. He works with the foreign rights people.
Mm-hmm. I imagine that most people don't think of agents as being creative types or creatives. But in a sense, you are, aren't you?
No, absolutely. And a lot of agents are writers as well. I mean, even in our own agency, we have Lauren Spiller, who is a YA author. She already has one book out, and the next one is coming out later this year. So, yeah, a lot of agents, for that matter, actually, a lot of editors are also writers. So they are very creative. I've dabbled, but I don't have time, and I don't think I'm like that super talented as a writer. But yes, there's definitely creativity involved.
So, but you also get involved in the writing itself somewhat, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I edit every project I get. I don't just take it. I mean, every book that comes in is, potentially great, obviously, because I like it. But then there's always something to improve upon. So then I go through edits with the writers to make it better. Make it stronger, and then what happens in the next step is when I think it's absolutely perfect and can't be any better, that's when I send it out, and then
they tell you what else needs to be done.
Exactly, yes. They send you like those 18 to 20 page editorial letters, and then they go back and forth with the writer about.
Sure. Do you, and maybe it's come see, come saw, but do you Do you focus more on structure, or do you focus more on characters? Do you focus more on dialogue, or is it just everything?
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah, including it starts as little as spelling and those kind of things, and then it goes into like character arcs.
Do you edit grammar as well and all that?
Yeah, I do. But the
do your authors like it?
I think they do. I mean, anything that's like too crazy, I wouldn't even take on. But like if people write well, whatever, but there's like misspellings and things in there, I'm like. Since I learned the language as a second language, I'm like zeroed in on spelling and those kind of things.
Right.
But yeah, it's character arcs. It's pretty much everything. Pacing. Maybe there's inconsistency in the timeline. So like there's all sorts of different things that I edit.
What do you do if an author has given you something and it's just terrific, but there's a section of it they've lost their voice somehow? What do you do?
Well, if it's not a client. In fact, I can give you a good example. A couple of years ago, somebody sent this amazing YA story to me, and I loved everything about it, except in 15% or 10% of the book, the the voice sounded not like a 17-year-old boy, but like a 45-year-old man writing it. But for the rest of the book, it sounded like a 17-year-old boy. And so I went back to the author and said, look, I'd like to offer, but I can't because I don't know if you can pull it off, because there's obviously a reason why you couldn't do it all through. And I said, if you can, here's some examples, if you can fix it, I will offer representation. And so if you want to go through this, then send it to me again. And he did. And he hit it perfectly. And I ended up selling the book, and it was one of the big books at Book Expo America. And so it worked out really well. But sometimes that's what happens.
And so you're a little bit of a psychologist at the same time.
Yes.
You have to work with, my assumption is that writers are artists and they have their frailties and their emotions and so on, and you sometimes have to work through that with them.
Absolutely. Like you have a book coming out and they might get like 100 positive reviews and then there's one bad review. And they focus and obsess on that one bad review. And I basically say, look, I really couldn't care less. I mean, I love the book, so I don't care if I'm the only one that loves it. Apparently the author loves it because they wrote it and the publisher loves it because they bought it. But of course I want people to love it, but if they don't love it and say bad things about it, then what am I going to do about it?
Well, it's just it's a much larger version of what happens when you're trying to sell the book in the first place. You might get 18 rejections. You're only looking for that 19th where they say yes. And it's the same with the public. Not all the public is going to like your book, even if it's a raging success. Just like when you go to a museum, you could get 3 people or 4 people to stand in front of a painting, and 2 of them will love it and 2 of them won't.
Absolutely.
It's taste.
Yep.
So you can't fight that.
No.
You can't force somebody to like your work.
That's right. That's why I wouldn't worry about it. If people don't like it, you don't like it. It's like even with you personally. People like me and other people hate me. I can't do anything about those that don't like me.
It's exactly right. That's a very tough lesson, I think, for a lot of artists who, like you say, will get 100 great reviews and 1 bad one, and they'll focus on the bad one.
Exactly. And they take it personally. It's like their baby in a way. You can, a lot of people feel of it that way. And so
it is like your baby.
Yeah, if somebody doesn't like your baby, then obviously you'll get personally offended by it. And I try to tell them, it's not personal. Even a rejection from an agent or a publisher or whatever, they're not personal. I don't reject people. Sometimes people query me and then I say no to them, and then some of them may never query me again because they feel the rejection is personal. But I can reject people many times, and sometimes then I might actually pick up like the 7th book or whatever. I had an editor who I've sent like 18 books to, and she kept saying no and no and no, but she kept wanting me to send her more books. Mm-hmm. And so at some point then I sold her a book, and since then I've sold her like 5 or 6 books, but still she doesn't buy every book I send her. So you just don't, just
and
keep
sometimes
going.
You don't really know what they're actually looking for at that moment.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's just not fitting into what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. I think one of the hard lessons, and this is good for the listeners to understand, one of the hard lessons for pretty much all kinds of writers to learn is that it's tough to sell a single property to an entity, whether it's a producer, a publisher, or whatever, because they have many properties that they're looking at the same time, and they're picking and choosing.
Correct, 100%.
And so you have to be willing to step back and think of it as a numbers game. The more you get to, the likelier it is you'll make a sale.
Right. Think about it. Again, if I get about 15,000 queries a year, I can't take on 50, even if all 15,000 books were incredible, mm-hmm. I cannot take on 15,000 projects.
No. Is there a publishing house in the world that publishes 15,000 different books a year?
Well, I don't know. I don't think so. But
I don't think so. I don't know how many are actually published in a year, but my imagination tells me it's 60 to 100,000 books a year are published.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. But as a large publisher, they might publish a lot of books, but they have a bunch of different imprints.
Sure. Sure, they're going out and many different imprints. So speaking of that, you represent plenty of different kinds of authors with different genres. Are there differences in what you do as an agent for the different genres, or whether it's fiction or nonfiction? Do you approach them differently in terms of the way you try to sell them, or is it all the same?
No, it's not all the same. The nonfiction is always sold on proposal, so you only need 10, 15 pages proposal, and then couple sample chapters to be like somewhere between 30 and 50 pages, and you take that out and to submission, and then they either buy it or don't, and then when they buy it, the publishers that is, then the author has to write the book. With fiction, any fiction, they have to have the novel completely ready before you can go out in submission. So it's different.
So you don't sell. This is interesting to me. The nonfiction books, you don't need to have a finished manuscript.
No, and the nonfiction, the most important thing in a way these days is you need to have a big platform. So if you're a TV star or a famous newscaster or whatever, or you are like an Instagram influencer with like 500,000 or more followers, that makes it easier to sell because a publisher can then go and look at it and say, okay, they got 500,000 followers on Instagram. Even if just like 1% of them buys the book, you still have some good, decent sales, I guess. And so that what makes it easy. Otherwise, you have to be a real expert. So if you're like, I don't know, a cancer specialist from Harvard, I can sell that book to someone because
they're an expert.
Exactly.
And they might have a name or a reputation that people have heard of or that someone can rely on.
Correct. And in fiction, the platform doesn't matter. I never look at the platform. It doesn't hurt, but I don't care.
So for instance, let's just take, for example, a YA novel versus a cookbook. Obviously, you've already said you can sell the cookbook with just an outline and some samples, but the YA novel needs to be complete. Is there a difference in the way that you think about approaching the publishing houses with those two books?
Yes. Well, first of all, you got to go to the imprints that buy those kind of books.
Of course, that makes sense.
So that's one thing. The other thing is like a cookbook as an example. I would only consider it, and I could be wrong, but I would only consider it if the person that wrote the cookbook has either a television show on one of the Food Network or something already, or if they run like a famous restaurant or have a restaurant chain. Because otherwise, I think, just me cooking some fantastic recipes probably won't get me a book deal regardless. Now, again, there are exceptions, but like by and large, I have to play the odds there. So if cookbooks come in, people, I don't know, even like locally, like Burgatory, if they were to do a book on burgers, I probably wouldn't take it because
they might... It's too local.
Yeah, too local. But if it were like someone that's like super famous or has a TV show, then I would take it.
But you'd be a natural. You'd have Uwe Stew.
Well, they can name that after me after I sell it. But with YA, whenever I like try to pick a project in fiction, I always think, even if I absolutely love it, if I cannot think of at least 10 editors that would like it, I won't take it on, because the odds that if I think it's like for like 6 people, the odds that one of the 6 will buy it are much slimmer than if I think of at least 10. Because if I think of at least 10, I can probably think of at least like 30 ultimately quickly. And then the odds that I can sell it increase.
So you are looking for maximum potential, clearly.
Totally.
And when the potential is small, that diminishes your interest in it.
Correct.
Okay. So when you start to work with novelists, YA, MG, whatever, do you have to see the whole book?
Yes.
You need to see the whole book.
Yes.
You don't accept clients based on an outline and a few chapters.
No, only my own clients. My own clients, once they work on something new, they send me like an outline sometimes and say, hey, Uwe, do you think this is a viable idea?
Got it.
And then I'd be like, no, or yes, and then they pursue it. And then I'm better at judging the whole book, though. So if they come and send me like 50 pages, I might love those. And then when the book is finished, I might say I don't like the book. And they'll be like, well, but you loved the first 50 pages. And I'm like, well, yeah, but, So I just don't, the way my brain works, I just need to see the full thing anyway. But like as far as an outline goes for an idea, I can judge it on that. But if somebody queries me that I don't know, no, you need to query them. And in fact, in the industry, you should not query the partial. Now, again, if Stephen King queried me with a sentence, I would take him,
What would that sentence be? It was a dark and stormy night. So do you work with authors in the development of their stories ever? I guess you don't with the novelists, the fiction writers, because you're expecting a whole book to come in. I'm talking about folks you don't represent.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't.
In the folks that you do represent, do you work on them with development of their books?
It depends on the person. Sometimes they run some ideas by me, and then I kind of try to sharpen the ideas to make them better even. Potentially, and in other cases, no. I mean, it just depends on the person.
Do you find yourself, when you are involved in the development, that your voice starts to leak in?
I mean, maybe more like my...
some influences
Yeah,
sometimes?
some influences, maybe, yeah.
because I think frequently artists are looking for someone to affirm that they're doing the right thing.
Right. I mean, it's even simple things like, one of my favorite words to use when I don't like something, I would say it's imbecilic. And so
Ouch.
I catch sometimes, now one of my clients uses that word occasionally in a novel. And I know they wouldn't have done it without me.
You're saying that you're an imbecilic influence?
Yeah, I guess.
All right, so you have, and you don't need to answer this if you don't want to. Can you say how many clients you work with at one time?
Well, that depends. It's really hard to judge. I have like in my own category, I have a thing called active clients, which are people that write regularly. And then I have a category called dormant clients,
Right.
dormant.
Yes.
And that's simply people that maybe write one book every 4 or 5 years, or they write one book and maybe never another one, or they are very infrequent. And so those, they're my clients, but I'm not always actively shopping something. But the other ones, they're always working. So you kind of keep your active list. It's always much smaller than you would actually think.
Right.
And so at any given point, I might be actively shopping, 8 or 9 clients or 10 clients. And then once I shop those, then the next 10 come in. So it's hard for me to say a give and take. I have like 40 plus clients, but it's give and take because you have the passive ones that don't write much.
But you're actively working on approximately 8 to 10 or 12 at a time.
At a time, yes. And plus then the film rights. I mean, I do then work with my other agents' clients as well, and my own, trying to sell those projects. And those are actually, in some ways, I do all of them at once. But of
Wow.
course, you go and tell people about the projects, and then they might only request like 1 or 2. But you got to keep them in the back of your mind.
So what special techniques do you use to keep them all straight?
I shockingly have like a weird memory that kind of I can't remember names or titles, but I know exactly like what books are there, and so,
You remember stories, but not
Yeah.
names or titles.
I guess, yeah.
And so you're able to just keep, you don't have I guess what I'm asking is you don't have a big whiteboard in front of you with all of your clients and how things are moving around, or
No, I mean, I used to have a Excel spreadsheet, which I abandoned after I was over 1,000 with
wow.
queries, and I was like, and then shortly thereafter I sold my first project. But I have a Word, so I use a Word document and say, where I submitted it to, or whatever. And then otherwise,
So you do keep track.
Oh yeah, no, I do keep track, but like I don't have to really refer to it because I know it's there. Once I write it down, I can kind of remember it. But then also, like on the website, we have all the sold books on there, and so if I reach out to film people, I can include sometimes these these other books we just sold.
What would you say is the percentage of time that you spend in the day in acquisition of new material?
I mean, as far as I check my email quite a bit. So any moment I do that, I'm doing actively acquiring, looking for acquiring material because I'm reading the queries to decide whether I want these books to be sent to me or not.
Right.
So that's it's a reasonably large part of my day.
And you're getting 50 of those a day.
Yeah, about give and take. Well, I'm quick. Again, I'm quick. So I read these queries and I make my decision quickly, and I can be wrong, obviously.
Well, it's your taste. It's not a right or wrong. It's just what you think.
Yeah, and and sometimes you also you're a human being. So if I for instance have like the day before get like 6 rejections for a mystery novel, somebody comes in, queries me the next day with a mystery novel. Odds are that I'll be like, I don't know if I want to do another mystery novel. But then if something is amazing, then I might still ask for it. So there's other factors that play a role too. But if I sat and like thought about every query for like 20 minutes, I would never get anything else done. So I got to be quick. So for writers, I need the attention. They need to do the query in such a way that it grabs my attention.
Okay, so what hooks you when you see a query?
I like it when it's a short query. So when it basically just, you greet me, you tell me about the length of the book, what kind of genre it is. Then you give me a quick, very short 2-paragraph like summary of what's going on and what's exciting and what's the arc, the story, the characters that's interesting. Then tell me a little bit about yourself, another paragraph, and be done with it. That's what I like.
So no more than a page and a half tops.
Exactly. At tops, yeah. So the moment I see even a query coming in and I have to like scroll, I already have a negative feeling about it. Even sometimes, I mean, I still, I'm interested in it. But usually when the query is like, I look at it and I'm thinking, geez, I got to do another 30 of these, and this one is so eternally long. Then if it does, then I start reading it. And then if it's not interesting to me right away, then I'm not reading the rest because I just don't have time for it.
So this is a very valuable lesson for the listeners, which is this. It works this way in motion pictures as well, because, that's where my background is in television. It works this way. You're sending your work off to incredibly busy people, and the better, the more likely it is that you'll sell it if you help them to help you, which means you need to be brief and thoughtful and colorful and terse. And if you're not, you run the risk of what you just said. You see this dense thing where you're trying to explain everything to someone, and they just don't have the time to deal with it. So they get turned off before they've even read it.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I couldn't say it any better. It's exactly right.
And so I think it's very important for up-and-coming writers to think about, and it's really hard sometimes, because sometimes you have a complicated story. How do you distill that down to 2 sentences, 3 sentences, a paragraph? And if you can, and it still has that, I guess the right word would be excitement to it, then I think you have a chance of selling it.
Absolutely.
So before you were an agent, you didn't know any publishers or publishing houses, did you?
I mean, I knew they existed. Yeah.
No, I mean, but I'm talking about your personal
No.
relationships.
No, not really. No.
None. So what did you do to establish relationships? How did you meet these people?
I mean, again, the internet was very helpful. But also, again.
But why would they be interested in even talking to you? They don't know you either.
You know what? That's true. But I think editors always want to find great projects too. Mm-hmm. And when I wrote them queries, and I would to introduce myself. I'm Uwe Stender, founder of Triada US. I wonder if I can interest you in whatever. And I think because I was professional, and I knew this because, again, I had some help. I think they want to find good projects, and I think they also want to give people a chance. And if you act professionally, then why not give me a chance? And they did. And I found editors extremely welcoming, and I was always excited when they took me seriously from the beginning. But I think it's a level of how do you come across? Are you professional? Do you follow the normal guidelines to submitting it? And, you have to know what these people want. So, I can't sell a romance novel to somebody who only does middle grade books. So,
sure.
So you got to, but once you fulfill all those requirements and you otherwise seem professional, I do think they want to give you a shot.
So I think that's also a very valuable lesson, which is, and sometimes writers forget this, is that the other end of the chain, which is where you're trying to get that sale, they are actually looking for something to make them happy. They're looking to make money. That's what they're looking for.
Right.
What can they take that makes money for them? So they're on your side in the sense that they want you to be good.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's exactly the point. I mean, this is what I mean, even like not taking, rejections personally, is because you it's a business. Period.
Another valuable lesson. It is a business, period. It is, as I like to tell people, it's called show business. It's not called show art.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Right? I mean, even with editors, I mean, the thing is, too, they might like me as a person. They meet me, have lunch with me. They might think Uwe is like the greatest person alive. But if I send them a book they don't like, they're not going to buy it because they like me.
Of course not. Or the author. They're not going to buy the book from the author because they like the author either.
Exactly.
The writing has to be something that they recognize that they can actually turn into money. Mm-hmm. And this is yet another aspect of it, which I think is very hard to define, if it's even definable, is can you tell when you read a book whether it's commercial? Do you have a sense of it?
I mean, I can always go by the fact, would I, if it's a children's book, for instance, or a YA, whatever, would I have loved this when I was that age? Or would people love it when they're the age right now? It's kind of a guess. But most importantly, I just have to get into it. And if I really love it, then I believe it's commercial and will sell because I think I have good taste. But, sometimes it doesn't work. You
have what the old studio directors, runners, whatever they were called, the producers of the studios used to have what was called gut instinct. Mm-hmm. And I think we've lost a lot of that in the world because a lot of things are worked on by demographics or by some form of business proposition, not whether or not it strikes someone in their guts.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And for me, again, I gave up a career to do this, and so the key for me has always been that I have to love what I do, because I don't want to go like dreading something. Because if I just went for like what I can sell but hate the book, it would be equally frustrating to me than having my old job back.
Right.
So in this case, I just want to have books I love and then see if I can, find an audience for them.
So you work with other agents in your agency. You're not
Yes.
the only agent. How many other agents do you have in the agency?
We have 4 others.
4 others. And did they come to you, or did you find them?
Well, they came to me, I guess. The first 2 came as interns originally, and they were so amazing. I read their first reader's report. I was like, okay, when the internship is up, I'm going to offer them a job. But I didn't want to tell them. So then I was really nervous at the end whether they were going to take it, because maybe they were having other plans. But
you were worried about being rejected, just like you do all day long.
Exactly. And then and they both took it, and they've had amazing careers since then. In fact, Brent Taylor is one. He was very young at the time. He's 18 years old.
Wow.
And he just has a great taste. And he had been an intern before with other people. And he knew he wanted to be a literary agent when he was like 12 years old.
That's amazing. How would anybody know that at 12?
I know. And he's been just incredible. He has great taste. He finds great projects. And he built our Foreign Right network. So it's amazing. And then Laura Crockett was the second intern at the time. And she also did great. And she has fantastic tastes. She maintains our Triada US Twitter account. And, her books, when she sells them, they're always really great books, really successful. And then since then, we also brought 2 other people in, Lauren Spiller and Amelia Appel, and they both came to us. They worked in the business before. And so, I'm very happy with both of them as well. So we have a really great group of agents. I'm very proud of my agency, and I'm very proud of every single person. And they really built this agency. I mean, our success, ultimately, our big success, came since we brought these other people on.
Would you say that you trained them, or that they did what you did, which is to learn on the job?
I think, well, at this point, I was kind of a mentor to them as well, and so I think it's both. They make mistakes, but then I can be there to help them, and I make mistakes, and they help me. So, you continue to learn all the way, all the time. And so, I think the learning never ends. And what I like about these 4 is that they want to learn, and they learn from each other too. And sometimes, I have nothing to do with what they're doing. It's just they go by their gut instinct. And I'm not a micromanager, so we check in, we do whatever. If they need help, I'm there. But I trust them, and they're all fantastic.
And you, if I've got this correct, everybody's in different places. You're not in one office, right?
No, I'm in Sewickley.
Right. It's right here near Pittsburgh.
Yes. Laura Crockett is in Indianapolis, or near Indianapolis. Brent Taylor is in Louisville. Lauren Spiller lives in Bethesda. She used to live in New York until recently. And then Amelia Appel lives near New York.
So listen to that, folks. We've got a business in hand that is very successful, and they're not even in the same city.
That's right.
I mean, this is the brave new world that we're in, where you can operate that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's in some sense, it goes back to when I first started. I could only be a literary agent if I lived in New York City,
right,
until I didn't have to. And now my agents don't have to be in the same city with me. They can be wherever, and I can be wherever. I mean, if those film deals keep working out for me, I might move to L.A. and then be in L.A.
Don't stay in Pittsburgh. There is no place to go train to be an agent, is there? There's no school you can go to.
I mean, they're publishing. There are like universities and places that do like publishing degrees,
but not agenting.
Not really. No, I think it's really just an apprenticeship type thing where people started as interns, then work their way up to assistants, and try with different agencies and learn. So it's very much an apprentice-based sort of business, I would say.
It's the same with motion pictures. I don't think there's any place that someone can go get a degree in how to be a motion picture agent, a talent agent of some kind. So I think it's interesting. It's a job that's perpetuating itself through its own enterprise, which I always think is kind of fascinating, because that means it's kind of wide open. People don't have preconceived notions about how you do that.
Mm-hmm, correct.
You didn't have any preconceived notions at all. You just had desire.
Right.
Right? So here's a question I ask a lot of guests. I've sort of asked it in another way earlier, but I'm going to ask it to you this way, which is, what for you makes a good story, not necessarily one you're representing, but in general, what makes a good story good?
I mean, I think it has to hit like some kind of commonality.
What do you mean by that?
Well,
All of universal humanity?
yeah, actually, yes. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons for why folk tales, for instance, get retelling, because folk tales, no matter which culture they're from, are oftentimes very similar in the plotting.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether you are, Indo-Germanic folk tales from like Germany or India or wherever, or if they're from Peru or from Africa, there's many elements that are similar, and that is what appeals to humanity in general. I also believe that, like, for instance, there's so many retellings of Romeo and Juliet as an example,
Right.
or Jane Austen. These projects are popular because there's something.
Or Jekyll and Hyde, if I may say.
Or Jekyll and Hyde, and they do hit like something that is common to all mankind, I guess, and I think people can like see themselves in it, have this experience, this common experience, and I think that's what makes a story strong when when it somehow can tie into this kind of commonality that can transfer borders. That's why books written by American authors can be bought in Germany and can be bought in Italy and France, because while the culture is different, the settings are different, there's something in the story that appeals to people from different cultures.
That's the first time I've heard that answer, which is really great. I mean, it needs to have a universal commonality. It has to be human, and humans are humans no matter where they are.
Yes.
Children still cry because they can't get food in their mouth or something like that, whatever it would be. And so I think that's a very interesting perspective, and I'm glad you said that, because I'd never heard it quite said that way. So when you get a little bit tired of all of it, I assume that occasionally it burns you out a little.
Yes. I have my moment. Well, let me just add one more thing to the last thing.
Please.
The other thing I think is important, despite what I just said, not despite of it, but because of it. Sometimes people want to find themselves in these novels. So especially in American publishing, oftentimes you have novels written by white people with white characters in it.
Yes.
And I think it's important that people of color authors can find themselves, can write books with people of colors as the main characters, so that the kids that read it will find themselves in it, and it still will appeal to other, backgrounds and cultures. And again, that's that commonality. And I think that's very important.
I agree with you. I think that, you're right. When a book is written from a different cultural perspective, whatever that is, whether it's someone from the Middle East, or whether it's someone who's African American, or whether it's someone who lives in New York versus Florida, wherever culture they come from, I think that what you're saying is true, that it needs to have that universal human appeal, and then it will cross all parties. And I think that that's what you call a winner.
Yes.
Because I think if you only appeal to a tiny group of people, you're not likely to sell it very well.
Correct.
And I for one, believe in a commercial business. I'm not looking, in my world, to create art just for my own sake.
Right.
Though that's how I approach it. I'm writing it for me, or working on a piece of art for me. But I think, will other people like this at the same time?
Absolutely.
I think that's a very, very good way to go. So when you do get a little tired of what you're doing, how do you refresh the well? What do you do? Do you read more, or do you get away from reading?
I read other people's novels. Usually, when I fall back, I read German novels. So I go back to my own culture at that point and read. Then I get
current or older.
Current.
Current.
Usually current, yeah. And so I go back to the mysteries usually, because I like those. And there's a lot of great German authors right now that do great mysteries. And so that's what I usually read. So I escape from the English a little bit. And then other than that, I run a lot, I bike a lot, I do those kind of things.
So you're still in an athletic condition.
Oh, I'm in very good athletic condition, yes.
And do you find that that's important in terms of making it easier to keep up with all the different things you do?
Yeah, for me, definitely. Like if I don't run every day or bike or do really like something extensively exhausting, I get very frustrated, and it all bottles up. And so I need to get at least that like 1 hour hard run in, or 2 hour bike ride, or whatever it is. because otherwise I just get really frustrated. So I need that outlet.
You need to burn that steam off.
Yes,
And that helps you to refresh the well, doesn't it?
absolutely.
That's what I was looking for. Okay, so what would you say is the biggest disaster that you've ever had happen, and how did you find your way out of it? Something that was a big mistake. That was like
there's so many. There were many mistakes I made along the way, and to be honest with you, oftentimes getting out of it was nothing I did. It's just like I lucked out many times where things could have been complete, utter disasters. Somehow, they didn't turn out to be, and it's just sometimes just blatant luck. I can't even say like a specific case. That would get a little bit too tricky. But I mean, there's sometimes like blind luck in it. I mean, it's kind of.
I would say there's a lot of blind luck in all kinds of success.
Yeah.
Success doesn't happen. First of all, success does not happen without a lot of hard work.
That's correct. And the other thing is too, I think
But you still need luck.
Yes, you do. And the other thing is, I think also that people forget is if you're just doing a job to make money, it'll be more difficult. If you do a job where you absolutely are passionate and love it, and that's the same goes with the project. If I love a project, I don't think about for how much money I can sell it. I just love it and I want to get it out there. And in time, the money will come.
Well, that's Joseph Campbell, isn't it?
Yes.
Follow your bliss, and the money will follow.
Yeah, I believe that.
I think that's 100% true. Okay, so how important are opening chapters?
Well, very. In fact, opening sentences or opening pages are important because for me, again, you're busy, do all these different things. And if you don't capture me by page 2, I probably stop reading.
Have to drag you right in.
Right away.
Get by the lapels and drag you right straight into it.
Yes.
I think that's very wise advice. It works the exact same way in screenplays. You have to drag them in straight off the top. How important then are closing chapters?
I think they're fixable. I think if you're very happy with an ending, whatever, then obviously you're happy with the ending. If there are issues where you feel like it's kind of rushed or something is wrong or the conclusion isn't like what it should be, then you can fix that because you have the whole novel to then lead. That would be one of the editing things I would do. I would say, okay, this ending doesn't make any sense. Let's fix it. So that is not that big a deal.
So in other words, the ending, but ultimately, before you publish, that ending's got to be pretty important.
Well, yeah, no, of course. I mean, before I submit it, it is, but it's not important. Like, if I love a book all the way through and the ending disappoints me, then I'll just fix the ending.
Okay, so let me take it past your liking or disliking it. I want to take it past it to where it's now going out into the world. How important in terms of, let's say, a series of books is that ending of that book? Is the ending really important to selling the next book?
Well, if it's a series, then they will usually buy the series. So then they will also, again, fix the endings. I mean, there's a lot of editing going on after the fact. So once the book gets sold, the editors will do a lot of editing. And so then that will shape the book sometimes totally anew and emphasize certain points, different points, work on an ending. And if it's then supposed to be a series potentially, then it'll be worked on like that. It kind of closes in on itself, but leaves some sort of cliffhanger so that you want to continue reading the second book.
There's room to grow.
Right.
I think that's very helpful in a series because I know you represent authors that are writing multiple stories out of the same characters. Okay, so believe it or not, we've been speaking almost an hour. And so the famous last 2 questions. You've worked with lots of different authors in the business and you've worked with lots of different publishers. Do you have, in your experience, an offbeat, oddball, quirky, or just plain funny story that you can share?
Well, there's so many, but I thought about this now, and I want to go with this story. When I went to my first book expo America, there's this big convention where publishers and buyers and librarians, whatever, get together and look at the upcoming releases. Huge event in New York City, and it's very exhausting. At the time, this was 2005. It was still very big. It was much bigger than it is in this day and age. And so I roamed around the first day, and I was really, really tired. It was about 4 o'clock, like not quite, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was just so tired. And I sat randomly at this table. And I got a cup of coffee, and I just sitting there exhausted and didn't know what to do. And so this guy walks up to me. Now, I want to point out also that I have face blindness, so I don't recognize faces.
That's interesting.
So anyway, I'm sitting there, and this guy comes in, and he, asks if he can sit next to me, and I said sure. And he, kind of a stocky guy, beard, had a hat on, and we just started talking like randomly about life, really. And so then after about like 40 minutes or so, 50 minutes talking with this guy, I saw this woman suddenly show up, and she seemed very nervous and antsy, and she was like pointing to the clock and the watch, and she tried to end this conversation. And this guy never veered off. We just kept talking. He enjoyed the talk. I enjoyed the talk. And then finally she came to me and said, you gotta leave because, you gotta go to the signing. And so he got up. He said, it was great talking with you, la, la, la. Well, it was George R. Martin. And I had no idea. I was just there talking with
You were talking to George R. R. Martin.
Yes, for an hour. And I didn't know who he was. Didn't recognize him. And then once I realized there was this gigantic line behind. I hadn't paid any attention to it. And there was this huge line. And then as I was leaving at the book expo, there were these big banners, George R. Martin, and they have hundreds and hundreds of books stacked up, and I was like, oh my God. So that, I didn't want to share this publicly because it makes me sound like a complete idiot, but yeah, it's a good story.
Yeah, that would do it. Did you make contact with him? Have you been able to?
No, not since. I just no. I mean, it was just really just a conversation amongst two people. At
a book fair.
At a book fair that didn't know anything about it. And we didn't talk about books. We talked about everything else.
Well, he probably loved it.
Oh, I'm sure he did, yeah.
Because all that he gets all day long are people tugging and pulling at him. Can you sign this? Can you tell me how you did that? And I'm sure some of it's a little bit tiring for him.
No, I'm sure he thought, I'm talking to this agent because you have a name plate. And so he's probably I'm talking to this agent who speaks to me like I'm some kind of normal person. And we just talk about everything, and may have been really refreshing, which is why I guess he sat there for an hour.
I'm sure it was refreshing to him. That you were just talking to him like a guy.
Yes.
Okay, so what is the best piece of advice or a great tip that you can give to authors that are just starting out or those that are in the business and are trying to get to that next level?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's many things, but I would say one thing you got to read in your genre. What I find sad sometimes is authors write books. Everybody's writing a book, but they can't, name any other book in their genre because they don't read. They should read more. Specifically, if they write YA, they should read YA and not just kind of whatever else. The other thing is they need to work on their craft all the time. Just don't think you're brilliant. Just keep working, try to improve more. And I think the next biggest thing is don't take rejections personally. We talked about this already.
Yep.
And then you can't give up. The reason people make it, if they have talent, I mean, some people legitimately don't have any talent and there's just nothing you can do. But people that have talent, if they don't give up, I think sooner or later it'll work out.
I think those are 3 or 4 really outstanding pieces of advice, especially the notion of persistence. Persistence, people that give up never succeed because they've given up, so they don't know where that next thing is going to happen because it could always happen around a corner. I also think the notion, which I teach when I teach at school here, that writing is like a muscle, and if you don't keep writing, it will just get flaccid like any other muscle. So you have to write and write and write. And the more that you write, the better you get. You can't go down the street and buy yourself your new book.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think I think it's a lesson in life in general. I mean, you're going to get better the more you do this. I mean, even for me as an agent, I'm certainly a better agent now than I was 14 years ago when I started. And I could have given up, but for me, there was never any way because I felt that I could not continue doing what I was doing. So I either made this work or I would just fail miserably, and then what? So I had no choice. I had to make it work, and I got beaten up, and there were tough years. And that's what I want to say for anybody that wants to be an agent. You got to find a way, no matter what it takes, to make it through those 5 years until you can actually make some money. Beforehand, it's very, very, very difficult and rare. So
it's similar to almost any part of life. You've got to stick to it. You have to keep working at it. It doesn't just, even for, what I like to point out is when baseball players, professional baseball players at the tops of their games, making millions of dollars a year, What do they do in the spring? They go to spring training. What do they do at spring training? They do fundamentals. What do they do before a game starts? They just hit balls. They catch balls. They just work the fundamentals. And these are people at the top of their skill set making unbelievable sums of money, and they still have to work the fundamentals.
Absolutely. I mean, here in Sewickley, we have Sidney Crosby, and I've seen him several times running on the streets.
Oh, is that right?
As fit as he is, and he just,
Well, he isn't fit as he is without doing that.
Exactly.
He suddenly stops being fit. So you don't get a free pass once you've had some success.
Correct.
You have to keep working it. Uwe, this has been a fantastic hour. I really am glad you came down and we've had this chance to talk on StoryBeat today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great episodes to you. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.